and welcome to chapter 13 of Stormbreaker. The last chapter was so exciting. After this one, we've only got 4 more chapters to go, so we'll be able to share the excitement in school. Can't wait. So this chapter is called School Bully. They came for Alex following morning. He had spent the night handcuffed to a radiator in a small dark room with a single barred window. It might once have been a coal cellar. When Alex opened his eyes, the grey first light of the morning was just creeping in. He closed them and opened them again. His head was thumping, and the side of his face was swollen where Mr. Grin had hit him. His arms were twisted behind him, and the tendons in his shoulders were on fire. But worse than all of this was his sense of failure. It was the 1st of April, the day when the Stormbreakers would be unleashed. But Alex was helpless. He was the April Fool. It was just before 9 o'clock when the door opened and 2 guards came in with Mr. Grin. Behind them, the handcuffs were unlocked and Alex was forced to his feet. Then, with a guard holding him on each side, he was marched out of the room and up a flight of stairs. He was still in Sale's house. The stairs led to the hall with its huge painting of Judgment Day. Alex looked at the figures writhing in agony on the canvas. If he was right, the image would soon be repeated all over England, and it would happen in just 3 hours' time. The guards half dragged him through the doorway and into the room with the aquarium. There was a high-backed wooden chair in front of it. Alex was forced to sit down. His hands were cuffed behind him again. The guards left. Mr. Grin remained. He heard the sound of feet on the spiral staircase, saw the leather shoes going down before he saw the man who wore them. Then Herod Sale appeared, dressed in an immaculate pale grey silk suit. Blunt and the people from MI6 had been suspicious of the Middle Eastern multimillionaire from the very start. They'd always thought he had something to hide, but even they had never guessed the truth. He wasn't a friend of Alex's country. He was its worst enemy. 3 questions, Sale snapped. His voice was utterly cold. Who are you? Who sent you here? How much do you know? I don't know what you're talking about, Alex said. Sale sighed. If there'd been anything comical about him when Alex had first seen him, it was completely evaporated. His face was bored and businesslike. His eyes were ugly, full of menace. We have very little time, he said. Mr. Grin? Mr. Grin went over to one of the display cases and took out a knife, razor sharp with a serrated edge. He held it up close to his face, his eyes gleaming. I've already told you that Mr. Grin used to be an expert with knives, Sale continued. He still is. Tell me what I want to know, Alex, or he will cause you more pain than you could begin to imagine. And don't lie to me, please. Just remember what happens to liars, particularly their tongues. Mr. Grin took a step closer. The blade flashed, catching the light. My name's Alex Ryder, he said. Ryder's son? His nephew. Who sent you here? Same people who sent him. There's no point in lying. It didn't matter anymore. The stakes had become too high. MI6? Sale laughed without any sign of humour. They sent 14-year-old boys to do their dirty work. That's very English. I'd have said, not cricket, what? He had adopted an exaggerated English accent. Now he walked forward and sat down behind the desk. What's my 3rd question, Alex? How much have you found out? Alex shrugged, trying to look casual to hide the fear he was really feeling. "I know enough," he said. "Go on." Alex took a breath. Behind him, the jellyfish drifted past like a poisonous cloud. He could see it out of the corner of his eye. He looked at the handcuffs, wondering if it would be possible to break the chair. There was a sudden flash of the knife. And there was a sudden flash, and the knife that Mr. Gwyn had been holding was suddenly quivering in the back of the chair, a hair's breadth away from his head. The edge of the blade has actually nipped the skin on his neck. He felt a trickle of blood slide down over his collar. "You're keeping us waiting," Herod Sale said. "Right, my uncle's here. He got interested in viruses. He asked about them. I thought he was talking about computer viruses. That was a natural assumption. I was wrong. I saw what you were doing last night. I heard them talking on the speaker system. Decontamination and biocontainment zones. They were talking about biological warfare. You've got hold of some sort of real virus. It came here in test tubes, packed into silver boxes, and you put them into the Stormbreakers. I don't know what happens next. I suppose when the computers turned on, people died. They're in schools, so it'll be school children, which means you're not the saint everyone thinks you are, Mr. Sale. A mass murderer. A bloody psycho, I suppose you might say." Herod Sale clapped his hands together softly. "You've done very well, Alex," he said. "I congratulate you, and I feel you deserve a reward. I'm going to tell you everything. In a way, it's appropriate that MI6 should have sent me a real English schoolboy. Because, you see, there's nothing more I hate in the world." "Oh, yes." His face twisted with anger, and for a moment Alex could see the madness alive in his eyes. "You bloody snobs! With your stuck-up schools and your stinking English superiority. But I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you all." Philip walked over to Alex. "I came here to this country 40 years ago," he said. "Had no money. My family had nothing. But for a freak accident, I probably would have lived and died in Beirut. Better for you if I had. So much better. I was sent here by an American family to be educated. They had friends in North London, and I stayed with them while I went to the local school. You cannot imagine how I was feeling then. Being in London, which I always believed to be the heart of civilization, to see such wealth and to know that I was going to be part of it. I was going to be English, to be a child born in a Lebanese gutter. It was an impossible dream. But I was soon to learn the reality." Sale leaned forward and yanked the knife out of the chair. He tossed it to Mr. Gwyn, who caught it and spun it in his hand. "From the moment I arrived at the school, I was mocked and bullied. Because of my size, because of the colour of my skin, because I couldn't speak English well, because I wasn't one of them. They had names for me: Herod Smell, Goat Boy, the Dwarf, and they played tricks on me, drawing pins on my chair, books stolen and defaced, my trousers ripped off me on the flagpole underneath the Union Jack." Sale shook his head slowly. "I had loved that flag when I first came here, but in only weeks I came to hate it." "Lots of people are bullied at school," Alex began, and stopped as Sale backhanded him viciously across the face. "I haven't finished," he said. He was breathing heavily, and there was a spittle on his lower lip. Alex could see him reliving the past, and once again he was allowing the past to destroy him. There were plenty of bullies in that school, he said, but there was no one worse. There was one who was worse than any of them. He was a small, smarmy shrimp of a boy, but his parents were rich and he had a way with the other children. He knew how to talk his way around them. A politician, even then. Oh, yes, he could be charming when he wanted to be, when there were teachers around. But the moment their backs were turned, he was on to me. He used to organise the others. Let's get the goat boy. Let's push his head in the toilet. He had 1,000 ideas to make my life miserable, and he never stopped thinking more. All the time he goaded me and he taunted me, and there was nothing I could do because he was popular and I was a foreigner. And do you know who that boy grew up to be? I think you're going to tell me anyway, Alex said. I am going to tell you. Yes, he grew up to be the bloody Prime Minister. Sale took out a white silk handkerchief and wiped his face. His bald head was gleaming with sweat. All my life I've been treated the same way, he continued. No matter how successful I've become, how much money I've made, how many people I've employed, I'm still a joke. I'm still Herod Smell, the goat boy, the Lebanese tramp. Well, for 40 years I've been planning my revenge. And now, at last, my time has come. Mr. Green. Mr. Green went over to the wall and pressed a button. Alex half expected the snooker table to rise out of the floor, but instead a panel slid up on every wall to reveal floor-to-ceiling television screens, which immediately flickered into life. On one screen, Alex could see the underground laboratory. On another, the assembly line. On a third, the airstrip with the last of the lorries on its way out. There were closed-circuit television cameras everywhere, and Sale could see every corner of his kingdom without even leaving the room. No wonder Alex had been discovered so easily. The Stormbreakers are armed and ready, Alex. And yes, you're right. Each one contains what you might call a computer virus. But that, if you like, is my little April Fool's joke. Because the virus I'm talking about is a form of smallpox. Of course, Alex, it's been genetically modified and to make it faster and stronger, more lethal. A spoonful of the stuff could destroy a city, and my Stormbreakers hold much, much more than that. At the moment, it's isolated, quite safe. This afternoon, there's going to be a bit of a party at the Science Museum. Every school in Britain will be joining in, with the school children gathering round their nice, new, shiny computer. And at midday, on the stroke of 12, my old friend, the Prime Minister, will make one of his smug, self-serving speeches. And then he'll press the button. He thinks he'll be activating the computers, and in a way he's right. Pressing the button will release the virus, and by midnight tonight, there will be no more school children in Britain. And the Prime Minister will weep as he remembered the day he bullied Herod Sale. You're mad! Exclaimed Alex. By midnight tonight, you'll be in jail. Sale dismissed the thought with a wave of his hand. I think not. By the time anyone realizes what has happened, I'll be gone. I'm not alone in this, Alex. I have powerful friends who've supported me. Yasen Gogorovich, you have been busy. He seemed surprised that Alex knew the name. Yasen is working for the people who've been helping me. Let's not mention any names or even nationalities. You'd be surprised how many countries there are in the world who loathe the English. Most of Europe, just to begin with. But anyway, he clapped his hands and went back to his desk. Now you know the truth, Alex. I'm glad I was able to share it with you. You have no idea how much I loathe you. Even when you were playing that stupid game with me, the snooker, I was thinking how much pleasure it would give me to kill you. Just like the boys I was at school with. Nothing has changed. You haven't changed, Alex said. His cheek was smarting where Sal had hit him, but he'd heard enough. I'm sorry you were bullied at school, he said, but lots of kids get bullied and they don't turn into nutcases. You're really sad. And your plan won't work. I told MI6 everything I know. They'll be waiting for you at the Science Museum. So will the men in white coats. They all giggled. Forgive me if I don't believe you, he said. His face was suddenly stone. And perhaps you forget that I warned you about lying to me. Mr. Green took a step forward, flipping the knife over so that the blade landed in the flat of his hand. I'd like to watch you die, Sale said. Unfortunately, I have a pressing engagement in London. He turned to Mr. Green. You can walk with me to the helicopter, then come back here and kill the boy. Make it slow, make it painful. We should have kept back some smallpox for him, but I'm sure you'll think of something equally creative. He walked to the door, stopped, and turned to Alex. Goodbye, Alex. It wasn't a pleasure knowing you, but enjoy your death. And remember, you're only going to be the first. The door swung shut. Handcuffed the chair with a jellyfish floating silently behind him. Alex was left alone. My word, I wonder what can happen, what Alex can do to get himself out of there, to save himself. You'll have to wait till the next chapter, Deep Water. Until then, bye bye.